Morning, everybody. How are you guys?
Great.
Don't all respond at once.
12:04 on the East Coast, so I'm just like afternoon.
Oh yeah, it's not morning. It's not morning. You probably have a giant large pie in front of you. And we're going to share one with Dick later today.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this, guys. I think a lot of folks will really enjoy hearing, Ilir, not only about your journey as a founder and a CEO, but Dick and Adam, you guys have such amazing experience and see so much in the tech community. It'd be great to just hear some of your thoughts about what got you excited about Slice, and we'll go from there. But Ilir, maybe talk a little about the journey of Slice, where we are today as a company, and when you started it and why you started it. A little bit about the mission of Slice.
Yeah, of course. Mission is to keep local thriving, and our mission is grounded on this belief that independent businesses, family-owned businesses, as Adam loves to say, are at a fundamental disadvantage relative to big chains because they are independent by nature. And so for Slice, in order to keep local thriving, we believe that we need to turn independent businesses into communities and then empower them with technology and marketing and brand, shared services, buying power, et cetera, et cetera. So fortunate to focus in this one category that is completely underserved and massive. So today we work with just about 16,000 small business pizza restaurants nationwide across 3,000 cities and towns. We will do over $1 billion in sales on behalf of these merchants this year, and growing very quickly across the board in terms of not only our network scale. So hopefully soon we'll get to 20,000 locations, and to give you a sense for what that means, the big chains in the US combined have 20,000 locations. And that's Domino's, Pizza Hut, Papa John's, Little Caesars. And so we're fast approaching a scale where our network is greater than all those 4 brands combined. But then more importantly, vertically integrating within the merchant base. We recently launched Slice Register, game-changing product that will give us the access to manage 100% of the volume for these businesses. And then Slice Rewards, which is the first of its kind nationwide loyalty and rewards program, where the consumer's rewarded for shopping from family-owned businesses. And so really excited about the momentum of the business. The team now is about 900 people globally. That's the Slice team, and scaling quickly, so hiring across a lot of different fronts. And then for me, what I'm most excited about is just continuing to surround myself with people like, obviously you, Jeff, you've been around the table since 2017, but now with Dick and Adam coming on board, we met a couple of years ago and really admire the work that obviously you've done in your careers, but also what that means for the Slice management team and myself as we look to scale to billions of dollars in revenue. So really exciting moments in time in the history of Slice, and I think for our future.
And Ilir, if I think about the SMB tech space, companies that are providing technology to small and mid-sized merchants, you've got companies like Square and Wix, and now Squarespace is going to go public, Ring Central, Service Titan, Toast. This renaissance of SMB tech, we're probably a decade into it. It kind of started around 08, 09, 010. And that's kind of right, I think, when you started Slice was right around that time frame. And you bootstrapped the company for 6 years, funded it yourself, raised no outside capital. When you did raise outside capital, and we came in right around that time, Primary came in, and then we invested. What has that done for the business, and how do you think about the round you just raised, and where do you guys think about investing it? And then I'm going to ask Dick and Adam for a little bit of their thoughts on how they got excited about Slice.
Yeah, I think, we're still in the early days of that small business renaissance, especially when it comes to e-commerce. In the small business space, it's still single digits penetrated in terms of what percentage of volume is passing through digital channels. You look at Domino's, they're at 75%. By default, that makes them incredibly efficient, and they pass that back to the customer in the form of better pricing, faster delivery, higher quality product. And so while it's been about 10 years, we're still super early in that journey. In terms of our investments, really focused on not only graduating our product experience for the consumer, but more importantly, focusing on the merchant solutions. I'll give you an example, something that I'm really excited about. We're going to manage over $1 billion in payments this year, as I mentioned. Today, we transmit those payments back to each merchant, and they take a check and they walk to TD Bank or Bank of America, and then like they'll deposit it and it will show up in 3 days, and then they have to pay their bills, they have to process payroll. What I would love and what I'm really excited about in terms of next frontier for us is, how about storing that capital within the Slice Bank, and then for us to be able to solve all those pain points on behalf of the merchants so that they could spend more of their time, in what they do best, in perfecting their craft and serving customers at the local base, local scale. So really excited about investing in that part of our ecosystem. The second one would be probably supplies. So, aggregating buying power and lowering the cost of supplies for these family-owned businesses.
And you mentioned the disparity between Domino's today is at 75, 80% mobile and web ordering. The local merchants are sub 5%. It's the same customers, right? I mean, it's not like it's some massively different demographic. It's just the fact that the merchants haven't had that technology solution, which is what you guys are providing. I just think it's such a, people are shocked at the growth of e-commerce and food delivery and telemedicine and all these things. And it's like, well, if you put the right tools in the hands of consumers, guess what? These technologies take off.
Absolutely. Look, I think one of the really overlooked aspects of technology and innovation is it moves incredibly fast. We all know that better than anyone. And when it moves at the speed of light, the earliest adopters are the most sophisticated businesses in the world. And that's because they have the capacity and the resources to be able to explore these new frontiers. But when you look at the smallest of the small businesses, they remain incredibly underserved. Like 40 or 50% of pizza shops in the US still don't have a website. Now, it is assumed by, most technology leaders that we don't need to innovate in that scale or in that sort of capacity. But I mean, we're just talking about websites. Imagine some of these other opportunities. So I'm excited to play in the world and the field and geographies where the underserved exist and to level up that playing field.
So Dick and Adam, how did you guys meet Ilir and what got you excited about the business? Talk us through the journey of building that relationship. And I'm sure you guys get pitched hundreds of ideas and companies every year. Why Slice?
Adam, you met Ilir first. Why don't you go first?
I met Ilir through Jeff, actually. We had this.
That was a softball.
Yeah, totally. We had this amazing meeting a couple summers ago, and I got a chance to meet Ilir, and just was instantly kind of blown away by his own personal story, his own family story vis-a-vis family pizzerias, and then what he's done to build the business. We talked about this before, but like our bet on this is pretty simple. It's a bet on Ilir and the team, which we take that bet all day. It's a bet on empowering local family businesses, which we think is both important and noble. And then 3, it's a bet on pizza, and I take that bet all day. Like there are only so many times in your career that you can bet on cheese, crust, and pepperoni. And when you see those chances, you just gotta go for it. I do think the empowering piece about local and family business is really important. As Ilir was mentioning, you've got these large institutional players which maybe have a lesser product at the front of the house, but they've done wonders behind the scenes, the back of the house on the technology side. And so part of when we were looking at Slice, part of what we saw was a company that's helping these family businesses compete on the back of the house. We already know the front of the house is much better, the pizza product, but how do you actually improve on the back of the house and do it in a way which is done more in a win-win? The one stat that Ilir didn't mention at the front of this was he saved, and Slice has saved, these family businesses over $250 million in excess fees that go out to third parties, usually to some of these delivery services and food delivery services. So I think, what's interesting about this family business piece, and these pizzerias, most of them are family businesses. Like you think, I was looking this morning, there's like Joe's Pizza on Carmine, or John's on Bleecker, or DeFara Pizza. These are all family businesses. In fact, the matriarch or the patriarch are actually still working in the kitchen. If you go to DeFara, Domenico DeMarco is actually there in the back, and his kids are working in the kitchen with them as well. And so I think you basically walk in and you see that this is a family business that's surrounded by love. And what Slice does is come in and basically help empowers those families. Like there's that old saying, blood is thicker than water. I think pizza sauce is thicker than blood. So it makes pizza much more important than family.
My follow-up question for Adam is, how do you know so much about local Brooklyn and Manhattan-based pizza shops? You've been on Lake Tahoe for the last year.
So on my old job at Twitter, I would fly out to New York every other week or so. And I would usually land on a Sunday, and then I would have a couple hours free. And so I would go explore the best pizza places in and around New York.
Oh,
I love it.
so good. Not good for your waistline, but I love it as a strategy. And Dick, maybe you can add a little bit of commentary on, you guys, you started 01Advisors with the idea of leveraging your knowledge and know-how, having, built Twitter and a bunch of other great businesses. And I'm assuming you're getting pitched hundreds of ideas, every year. What rises to the top when you think about something like Slice? Adam mentioned a bet on Ilir, but what are the other things that you look for? One of the things I love to do is give entrepreneurs who will tune in and watch this a little bit more context on what we look for as investors in a company that can scale and become something that's really big.
Yeah, we invest a lot at the sort of early growth stage. The Slice is a little bit further along than where we normally invest. I would say there are a few things we look for. A couple of these we knew about going into Fund 1, and one was really a lesson learned during the process of investing Fund 1. And those things are a total addressable market that's much bigger than it appears. I think one of the lessons learned from fintech generally over the last 5 to 10 years is, let's go back and talk about companies like Stripe and Square 10 years ago. Nobody thought those were going to be $50 billion businesses.
100.
Sorry, my information.
But you're right. Nobody thought they'd be 50, and nobody thought they'd be 100. And here we are.
Yeah, no, right. But that goes for, and that's not just those two companies. It's Toast. It's Spot. Nobody thought Toast was going to be an $8 billion business 3 years ago. Nobody thought Spot On was going to be such a huge business 2 years ago. These businesses are growing to be enormous companies. The TAM is much, much bigger than anyone thought it was. And I think the exact same thing is true here. So early on, Adam and I sort of felt, look, this thing could probably be like a Toast or a Spot On or a Stripe, much bigger than anyone currently thinks it could be.
Yeah.
I think a big lesson learned for us during the process of investing Fund 1 is CEO EQ is a huge factor. I mean, where we were wrong in Fund 1 when we didn't invest, and then later on looked back and went, wow, that was a miss. 100% of the time, and fortunately there weren't dozens of those, but there were a few that we really missed on, and it was always, wow, we loved the CEO. They knew that they didn't have all the answers. They were information sponges. They were constantly trying to learn, and that's got to be a big heads up for us, going forward. And Ilir is one of those people. I mean, you meet with him, he's asking lots and lots of questions. You meet with some executives and founders, and they kind of interrupt you and go, yeah, I know. Yeah, oh yeah, no, I know. I know. I'm going to get to that later. And those are, the people who think they already know all the answers. Adam and I aren't going to be able to be helpful, because what we do is we come in and we help try to mitigate execution risk. Having made all the mistakes that they're running into 19 times. And if the person thinks they already know all the answers, maybe they do and maybe they don't, but we're not going to add any value. And CEOs who have really high EQ and know there's a lot to learn and know that the only way they're going to be successful is to constantly figure out what they need to learn more quickly are great people to get behind, and Ilir is one of those people.
Really appreciate that. Thank you, Dick.
And Ilir, you have built this, we live in a universe today where like every day there's some mega funding news and companies are raising tons of money, and you got firms that are, putting down term sheets after one meeting. One of the stories I love about Slice is you built this business pretty much to today on like 25 million of capital, maybe 30. Pretty amazing and very capital efficient. As a result, you own a huge chunk of the company, which is awesome. And you didn't need to raise right now. We were, I think most of last year, we were profitable.
Yep.
What kind of spurred the interest in bringing Dick and Adam in and raising some more capital? How did you think about that?
Yeah, of course. And you're right. I mean, look, I bootstrapped for 6 years, and then even in the last 4, we've been very capital efficient. I think part of that has to do with the model itself and, high gross margins, and we're predominantly a software business. While a lot of people think we're a delivery company, we actually don't provide the delivery directly. Most of our merchants do that, as we call it, first party. And so we've gotten to a point where, we'll do over 100 million in revenue this year, and we've burned about 25 million in capital to get there, which I'm pretty
Amazing.
proud of. But at the same time, there's moments in time where, it's time to hit the gas pedal. And so I would say now is one of those moments, and the way I like to solve problems isn't leading with capital, but it's leading with surrounding myself with people who have done that before. And then capital sort of sometimes a trailing, lever. And so for this round, I mean, look, we haven't touched the capital we raised last year from KKR, but for me, it was all about partnering with Dick and Adam. And, they were gracious enough to say, look, now is the time. And we recognize a miss in not being able or not investing, a couple of years ago. And so here we go. Time to make it work.
A subtle jab. I pitched you guys.
I was wondering. I thought Jeff was going to be
I was
the one
waiting for that.
No.
I keep it authentic.
my favorite.
Lear's got a ledger.
Yeah, my favorite part of the history of that story is Jason Herenstein, who I got to know when he was a corp dev at Google and bought FeedBurner, is on your board. And Jason told me like 6 months ago, I don't know why you did this when I was pounding the table for it. Like, you didn't pound the table for it. I asked you specifically about it, and you're like, oh, I like it. I like Ilir.
Now, to finish that story though, for me, I was just like thrilled that you guys, still wanted to partner. And so for me, it wasn't about the capital. It was the opportunity to work with you both. I admire everything that you've done. And so that's kind of how this round came to be, which was initially we were going to actually do it as a note, if you remember, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And then GGV, KKR, Cross Creek, which ended up leading the round, all existing investors, primary ventures. Everyone's excited about, just re-upping, and it was just something that kind of came together very quickly. Also, just fortunate that everyone recognized the performance of the business and the team over the last 12 months, and it ended up being a very, honestly, quick no-brainer.
And Ilir, you've been. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to also get to the idea that you've been very proactive in getting people around the company that could be helpful to you in growing the business. You brought on Deirdre Bigley, who's the CMO of Bloomberg, as an independent board member. You brought on Kat Cole, who ran Fortune Brands and which Cinnabon. Brought on her as an independent board member. You're bringing in Dick and Adam. A lot of entrepreneurs, Dick sort of referenced this point we run into as investors, where people are like, I got this. And then you've got founders like you who are much more about, hey, how do I get the best people around me I possibly can to help me succeed? What drove that mentality for you? And then Dick and Adam, I'd love to just get your guys' take on what is that DNA and where do you see it and where do you not see it? Because I certainly, I'm a big advocate of companies adding independent board members early on, but I'm just shocked that so few do. So Ilir, maybe start with you on that.
Yeah, look, I see it firsthand for my own company. Like, I was bootstrapping, and early on I was just like, I have all the answers, I just need to execute. And then we were pretty slow in executing over the first 5 years. Now, super proud of where we got to, but we probably could have shrunk that window if I moved faster on talent at the board level and beyond. And so just the difference in the company's performance between being bootstrapped. And then the moment I started partnering with folks like, super early with Paul Applebaum and Jason Finger, who founded Seamless, and
Yeah.
Ben, and yeah, most recently, super proud of Kat Cole joining, and obviously Dick and Adam. For me, it's not having an ego about where ideas come from and how things should scale. Like, no one has all the answers, and to be able to tap into folks who have seen the movie before, I don't know the exact numbers, but you guys scaled Twitter to billions of revenue from zero. That takes an incredible amount of, lessons and opportunities, and it's all a function of time. So you can choose not to surround yourself with folks like Dick and Adam, and it'll take you a lot longer because you're going to repeat the same mistakes. Or B, you can move much faster and therefore create much more value if you surround yourself with folks like these guys and Deirdre and Kat Cole. And so at the end of the day, we're all here to create value for our customers, for our shareholders, myself. And so it's all about speed and velocity and shrinking the window to getting to that scale.
Yeah, Jeff, I couldn't agree with what you just said more. In 2011, after I'd been CEO of Twitter for about a year, I guess, we added independent directors, multiple, to the board, in Peter Chernin, who had run, 20th Century Fox and News Corp as the COO, and David Rosenblatt, who had been CEO of DoubleClick and built and grown that whole business. And the immediate impact of having operators in the room who have led at scale, Peter had 40,000 people working for him, who had people working for them, in an advertising business like David around the world. It's just questions that only those people are going to have answers to is invaluable, instead of like, oh, I'll go, I guess I'll go ask somebody to ask one of the CEOs in the portfolio. And it's all sorts of random things, remember as we got to be like a couple thousand people, it's like, Peter, how do you get people to tell you the truth? The next incremental employee in the company, the two people that were there the day you got there and in your start group or whatever, when there were 45 or 50 people at Twitter when I got there, they're going to come up and tell you the truth because they think of you as that's just Dick. And we started the same day. But the 2000th employee in Singapore is like, wow, the CEO is not someone I can just go walk up and talk to. So you're like, so people like Peter and David were the people here's what I did to try to get people to tell me the truth when I started to realize the bad news isn't getting to me, as quickly as it needs to. And that kind of helps and valuable. And you don't have, of course, the fact of the matter is you don't have the answers to how to do that if you haven't done it before.
And what are some of the other things that you guys point to? Is there like a 10 commandments of scale? You get to where Ilir is, call it 100-ish million run rate, billion of GMV, 900 people around the world. Like it's, and we always tell people like 85% of the people we back are first-time founder CEOs. So it's not like they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do when I get to 1,000 people. What are the things that you guys tend to see break down? I mean, Dick, you mentioned one, which is people won't tell you the truth. What are some of the other things that you look for and say, like, I mean, the three of us have had these conversations where you're like, yep, seen that movie before. What are the things that start to break that worked for these companies early on that start to not work at this scale? Because the flip side of it is what we see when we see companies hit this stage, when they do handle these issues and get to be public companies, is they get this like amazing tailwind, right? The brand, the capital, the ability to acquire other companies, the culture of being a public company is just phenomenal. But what are the pitfalls that you see people run into at this stage? And what did you guys run into? I know you made a lot of mistakes along the way, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, a big one is, and actually Claire Hughes Johnson at Stripe probably phrases this better than I'm going to take her phrasing because I didn't previously phrase it this way. Don't solve problems with processes, solve them with ownership and operating structure. If you solve problems with processes, pretty soon people are managing to processes instead of managing to outcomes. Mm-hmm. And you're the TSA and everyone's taking their shoes off, but not making sure there's not a bomb on the plane. But you can, you get there because you're like, well, that can never happen again because, we lost this merchant. So we got to add at step 17 to the onboarding process so that when, blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon the onboarding process is 19 pages long and everyone, when a mistake happens, people go, well, hey, we did everything in the 19 pages, not my fault.
Right.
You don't solve problems that way. Everything slows down, especially as you scale, when you're trying to make sure you can still move as quickly as possible. Solving problems with ownership and operating structure, organizational structure, et cetera, is increasingly important, not less important.
Yeah, Dick and I also spent a bunch of time with leadership members of special forces to try and unpack what are some of the keys that they've learned throughout the years in managing groups of people to do extraordinary things. There were two.
Before Adam jumps on that, the important part about this is the reason we went to those guys is if they if they fail, the consequences are people die. So we just always felt like those were people to go to figure
Pretty high
out,
bar.
hey, how do you make sure you adapt as quickly as possible? Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there were a bunch of things that we learned and incorporated into management style of Twitter. Some of it was just, what does it mean to be a manager? So we were asking one of the leaders of a small team that goes in and does interesting things. How do you actually, talk to us about when you have this small team, what actually happens? Like, as the leader of that small team, how do you manage the team? And he said something pretty interesting. He said, look, one is the team literally moves as a group. And so everybody's kind of covering all angles, and you kind of move as one entity, which is kind of interesting to think about as an organization. And everybody has a job to do. That job is pre-rehearsed and pre-practiced, and you kind of expect the unexpected, et cetera. So everybody has a job in that small team, except for one person. The only person that doesn't actually have explicitly a job is the leader, it's the manager. And the reason why is the leader should be looking where no one else is looking. And I thought that was a pretty interesting way and story about leadership and management, where if done right, a high-performing organization, the leadership team or leaders in the organization the org should be set up in a way where that leader is looking where no one else is looking. And then the other interesting thing that we learned is SEALs do this after they come back. When they come back from a in-field action, they do something called the wash, which is used to be literally when you're washing off your gear, but you get together in a small group and talk about after every single mission, if you had to do it again, things that you would sustain and then things you would improve. So in tech, it's a retro, but what it made us realize is most of the time retros at tech companies happen when bad things happen, right? So something bad happens, you do a retro and you go like, how do I ensure that never happens again? And so what you get built up is anytime something bad happens, you kind of key into a blameful retro. And the interesting thing is, how do you actually, the more important thing is when good things happen, how do you actually dissect that and understand why that good thing happened so that you can actually replicate it and sustain it? And so that was one of the other things that we did is there certainly were enough bad things to go around happening at Twitter that you could spend in retros all day. So what we try to do is after any event, try and pull out these interesting areas of success so that you can try and figure out what actually led to it, unpack it so that you can actually replicate it and sustain it.
Yeah, I like that.
The last thing I'd add, that's probably the most common challenge as you scale, especially as a CEO that's been with the company sort of the whole way, is the communication architecture of the company. You'll get to the point where there's X hundred people and you'll think, sure, everyone knows what the top 3 priorities are. I stood up at the all hands meeting and I said 1, 2, 3. And so, of course, and then I said it yesterday again at my management team meeting. Of course, everyone knows what the top 3 priorities are. And you could go to, employee number 332 and ask them what the top 3 priorities are. And they'd, point in 14 different directions. You just have to be really thoughtful and consistent and constant about communicating the priorities, making sure everybody understands how to be successful, what it means for us to be successful, and how how it will impact all of us when we are successful. And if you think you can do that like once a quarter or something, when you get up and stand it up and talk about the OKRs or what have you, it's not sufficient.
Ilir, any thoughts or comments on what these guys have shared? Other than you're just
other than it all
soaking it
resonates.
in.
It all resonates.
Yeah.
No, I would say these are issues I'm facing on a daily basis. I think the last one about priorities is such an important one. And employee number 332, of course, they probably will have a difficult time, but we just had a leadership offsite where it was the exec team and sort of the broader leadership team. And let's call it 18 people. The definition of the top 3 priorities from that group were different. And regardless of not only the consistency at which you communicate, but I think it starts creating the need for a proactive operating system where folks can sort of, align around those 3 priorities in a way where I'm not the only one who's relied upon for the communication of those priorities. So how do you cascade communication across the board becomes really important, but all very important questions because, we tend to go, I love what Adam said the other night, we were on Clubhouse. We all tend to then go and firefight this problem of people not knowing the priorities, when instead we should be thinking about, what is the structure of the organization and how. Adam, chime in there in terms of your analogy, but
6 lines, so I'll let him use it.
go for it.
I don't know which line you're referring to.
The firefighting line.
Oh yeah, you get to the point where it's not about fight. It's not about firefighting. It's about forestry management. I mean, I literally had a CEO call me the other day and said, "Hey, now that we're this size, there's like 5 things on fire, and I don't know which one to go put out." I was like, "Yeah, because you're not firefighting anymore. It's forestry management. You got to be. That's what running this whole organization is going to be about." And you have to also live with the fact that there are always going to be now things that are on fire, and you have to put them in the back of your mind, right? Like, I can't go do that right now. I have to, one of the things I remember David Rosenblatt, again, going back to the beauty of independent board members who have been operators, David said, the thing I used to tell myself as CEO or ask myself is, what is the most high leverage thing I can be working on right now? What's the highest leverage thing I should be doing right now? And some of those forest fires are only going to affect 3 people in the company and 1 customer. And they may seem important right now because that customer is upset and these 3 employees are upset, but that's no longer something you can go spend a lot of time on. You have to be in the forestry management business.
Hey, Dick and Adam, one of the questions, I did an interview with Frank Slootman, who's the CEO of Snowflake, a few weeks ago. And I asked him this question. I said, Frank, how do you motivate your team? And he looked at me like I was crazy and goes, "I don't hire people that need to be motivated." But how, as you get bigger, I mean, Ilir just mentioned he's got 900 people in the company. How at Twitter and in other top performing organizations you guys are involved in, how do you, because, one of the things that's always a challenge for us is like, we see the big picture, the CEO sees the big picture, but then you've got that, engineer or support rep in Macedonia who's 1 million miles away that's not totally connected to the strategy. How do you keep those folks motivated and engaged and feel as you go from 90 people to 900 to 9,000? Is it you walking around and management by walking around? Is it having somebody internally who's doing communications? Is it employee parties? What are some of the best practices you could share with founders on building culture, building team, keeping people fired up because these are also hard, right? Building a company is hard. Like where every board meeting I have with a company, we're like, this is a hard phase. It's like, yeah, every phase is a hard phase, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I had a YC, I had a young YC founder come up to me in a coffee shop in San Francisco pre-pandemic and say, "Hey, are you Dick Costolo?" And I said, "No." But he asked me, "Hey, I'm about to start YC. If you could give me one piece of advice going into starting and running a company, what would it be?" And I just said, "It's always hard.
Yeah.
Remember that, and you'll be fine." But to the point you just made, you have to help people understand. So the way I used to think about that is you have to tell people why it's important that we're successful. Not, you don't want to get up on stage at an all hands meeting and tell people what to do or tell them, we have to have a sense. I always just find it funny when people would say like, you know, you got to tell people they have to have a sense of urgency. It's like, well, that's not gonna. What's that gonna make? What's that gonna do if you get up on a stage at an all hands meeting and say, you guys need to have a greater sense of urgency? Like, you know, like about what?
Yeah.
You know, but if you help them understand why we have to be successful, and we used to do that with different sorts of things, like at an all hands meeting, we would have the media team run this little segment called Twitter in the World, where they would talk about, here's an example of how Twitter literally saved somebody's life or impacted these kinds of this particular minority group in this country. And
That's
you know,
cool.
that helps people understand why we have to be successful and why we have to achieve what we have to achieve. Just getting up there and telling people what to do, first of all, they don't then have any sense of ownership, because they're like, well, that was Dick's stupid idea, so if it doesn't work, I guess I'll sit around and wait for him to tell me what else to do. And then there's no sort of like, oh my God, we really have, you know, that was incredible, this thing that happened in Syria. That's why, you know, the site can never go down anymore. And that was a long time ago now at Twitter. But, you know, those are the kinds of things you have to help people understand. You can't just get up there and say, hey, the site can't go down. I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, one of the things that we focused on was really kind of tops down, mostly just setting the conditions for success.
Yeah.
And describing what success looks like, but then leaving from bottoms up, leaving the innovation to happen, so that you're actually not, you know, telling the org how to do it. You're just kind of laying out, here's essentially what it means to win, and here's how we define winning.
And then I'd say one other thing is you have to listen to the team. You know, we've all worked, I think we probably all worked in organizations where, you know, you finally work up the courage to go tell management how screwed up your situation is, and they, you know, either ignore you or defend the status quo and say that's not, you know, you're wrong, that's not a problem. You know, if somebody works up the courage to come, you know, raise questions or this seems weird and I don't understand it, you know, that's the perception then of a bunch of people in the organization, not just that person. And you have to listen to their perception, because perception for them is their reality. One of the things I used to do that was really helpful was I would do these skip level meetings, sometimes to the annoyance of my executive team, or I would just meet with just, you know, ICs on the design team, or just ICs on the account management team in the, you know, West Sales region, and just sit down and say, point around the room and say, hey, you know, Jeff, tell me something that's not working well at Twitter. You know, and Jeff says whatever he says in it. Anna, do you agree with that? You know, yes or no? You quickly find, and then, you know, you're not going to throw your executive team under the bus and go, yeah, you're right, Adam's crazy and wanted by the authorities, so I'm going to go talk to him about that. You just listen to them and say, okay, that's interesting, I'll bring it up with the management team on Monday. You quickly find out whether that team understands what you understand to be true and is working well with other teams, and they're all on the same page or they're on different pages. That's a great way to just quickly come up to speed as you grow and grow and grow on. Do these teams all understand what's really going on in the company and how we think about it as a management team?
It's hard sometimes also, and I'd be interested in Frank's take on this in terms of competition, because you're competing on a daily basis, and it's sometimes you get very focused on competition. You know, we actually had a pretty good analogy around competitive forces, and we used to talk about it like driving a car. And when you're driving a car, you have your rearview mirror, and when you drive, you're looking at the road ahead and where you should be going, what you should be doing. Every once in a while, you're glancing in the rearview mirror to check in on what's behind you, and I think that's a pretty good analogy for competition, which is it's fine to glance every once in a while at the rearview, but you can't drive while looking in the rearview mirror the entire time, or you're going to hit the wall. And so, you know, from a competition standpoint, it's trying to find a right balance and not be too myopically focused around competition, because mostly competition should be what's in the rear view, and you're actually plowing ahead, looking forward, looking ahead.
Yep.
And I think that connects back to the why, to Dick's point, and yours, Adam, which is, if that why is powerful and clear and focused on the customer, then that becomes the main focus of where the team's, you know, motivation and aspiration and goals come from. If your why is, hey, I want to be, you know, bigger than DoorDash, then the focus is going to be on DoorDash. And
Exactly.
that can't be the case.
Exactly.
I know you, Ilir, you heard Ilir at the top of the, at the top of this segment. The why is great. I mean, it's an awesome mission. Like, we're going to help these small businesses and these family-owned shops compete against the biggest companies in the world, and we're going to give them all the leverage they need to do that, and empower them. That's an awesome. I mean, going to work every morning knowing that you're doing that for thousands of families around the country, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this on the Clubhouse last week, but like, there's sort of this belief that there's an inevitable shift to the big box retailers and the big merchants, the McDonald's and the Little Caesars. And to me, what we see happening, we're seeing this in the e-commerce space with Wish and Poshmark and StockX, and, is a Shopify and BigCommerce, a reinvigoration of small business and their ability to compete, because they, in many cases, they're delivering a better product, they're delivering a better experience, right? We all got used to just the default of buying on Amazon, but I've seen an uptick in our household. God knows we have 1 million packages that arrive every day. Some of them are coming from places other than Amazon. And I think as we, particularly in a post-COVID world, 60% of America works for a small business. Like, we as a country can't afford to have small business go under. And so I love, like you guys said, I love the mission of Slice. I love, the why is Billy's Pizzeria. It's, that local merchant and giving them the tools to compete and hopefully increasing the size of their business. I think that's Ilir mentioned it earlier, increasing the TAM. If we can take a merchant that generates, $400,000 a year in annual sales, and that's, 75 grand, take them to 600,000. And most of that's going to be profit because they're already paying for the infrastructure. Damn, that is powerful. Super cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
it's expanding.
Connecting the whole team to those customers, getting Billy from Billy's Pizza to come talk to the team about how this has changed his business. That's like, those kinds of things are just fantastic. People, lots, as a CEO, you're going out and talking to customers all the time, and you think maybe everybody talks to customers, but they don't. And getting those folks in front of the company, in front of the employees, and helping them understand this is what you did to help my business is hugely impactful.
Completely aligned. Completely aligned.
Hey, I want to be conscious of time and wrap here, guys. But one of the things I want to touch on that I think is a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs at this stage is, how do you decide what to focus on? So we're talking about increasing the TAM and launching point of sale, launching loyalty and brand campaigns, and expanding to 20,000 merchants. One of the challenges that we find companies at this scale have is an embarrassment of riches, right? As you get bigger, people come to you and say, hey, you guys are great at this. It'd be great if you could also do X, Y, and Z. What's your recommendation, Dick and Adam, to CEOs like Ilir as they try and pick the things to focus on, because the team can't do everything? And how do you balance that as you're scaling at this stage?
Adam, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think one of the things to be searching for are these false multipliers, things that if you just focus on this one thing, it opens up either other opportunity or other aspects to the business. In marketplace businesses, usually that's focusing on a supplier demand element. For example, going and locking up or focusing on supply, then is a force multiplier to other parts of the business, including profits and margins and the like. And so I think thinking about what is your force multiplier on the business, and then going and doubling down there. And if done right, it actually, you're doing what it says it's doing, which is you're applying a little bit of force, a little bit of focus. And when you push that thing, you get enough leverage that it opens up other opportunities. So kind of your effort that you're putting against this specific task will open up into multiple other benefits.
One of the things that maybe is counterintuitive is, as you grow and scale and the org gets bigger and bigger, it's more important that you have lots of free time on your calendar and you're not in a meeting back to back every half hour from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. Because as Adam said earlier, when we talked to the special forces people, and one of the people he's referring to was the XO of a squadron on Team 6, SEAL Team 6. His point was, look, my job is to create and set the conditions for success. And if I have a role in this particular mission, I can't be looking where no one else is looking. And so to having free time to be able to look over the next thing that, what are the things we're not thinking about right now because they're not important to the next quarter that everyone else is jamming on that we really need to be thinking about. If you don't have free time to go do that or talk to people in the organization about that and think and focus, you're always going to be on the treadmill and not going to be able to go do the things you need to do. So I think it's true that the most effective CEOs of scale businesses have calendars that don't have meetings booked on them from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. They have got multiple blocks of time in the morning and the afternoon where they're, thinking and focusing on things that nobody else is thinking about or working on right now.
Are there any thoughts from you? Things you've learned over the last year on this?
I love that. I would say, obviously from you and Ben, board members, at Slice, Ben speaks to this. Ben Sun from Primary speaks to this really powerfully, which is, he calls it a Stalingrad. And so it's an analogy from his work with Bain at Coupang, where, like many other companies, you've got so many different number one priorities that compete with one another. And ultimately, to Adam's point, there's only one really, multiplier, call it leading indicator, that is going to lift sort of the tide that lifts all boats. And, pounding the table around that one thing that you just cannot miss on is incredibly powerful. And I've applied it, I'm sure, with a ton of mistakes here at Slice. But I know, it's like yesterday, Ben came to the office here and, big white board, and he just wrote one thing, Stalingrad, with a big circle. And he's like, what is that? Tell me what that is. And those are the kinds of questions that, people with no experience or scale, they will never ask. Like, I never had that question asked. So I just think it's incredibly powerful, and it's an accelerator in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, guys. Appreciate the time. And Dick and Adam, we're thrilled to have you guys be part of the Slice team. And I can vouch for your sentiment towards Ilir being somebody who's a lot of fun to work with. And Adam, look forward to you you're trying to top me on the leaderboard. Ilir, we need a leaderboard for board members and how often they order. I'm pretty frequent, but it sounds like Adam might top me.
This is what I was saying is this was fantastic diligence that we did. It was about a year's worth of diligence. And unlike other investments, we've continued to do diligence even after writing the check.
Absolutely.
My new Stalingrad will be a leaderboard for the board members.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you, guys. And we're thrilled to have you on board. And Ilir, thanks for everything you're doing for small businesses around America. It's awesome. And I think it's a big part of what we're looking for in the COVID rebound here in the US is a resurgence of small business. So love to see you leading the charge.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.